This river is life to our people. These canyons, these rivers created deep canyons throughout southern Idaho, the Wahi Canyon, the Bruno, the Jarbidge, Big Jacks. These are all important places to our people.
As I begin today, I give thanks to Creator for the great long stewardship of this land by the Shoshone, Paiute, Nez Perce, and Bannock brothers and sisters.
If I could leave you with 4 words that would encapsulate the day, those 4 words are: one river, ethics matter. The map that you see was developed by the tribes. That map is color-coded. You'll notice the areas that are in pink. Those areas are ancestral habitats for salmon, for anadromous runs of fish that are now blocked by dams.
And I think it's really important that, the Hells Canyon complex be considered for some type of renovation. We have tribal communities in the upper Snake River drainage that have lost, a serious part of their subsistence by losing the salmon.
While the context for this conference is the larger Columbia River Basin and the need to modernize the Columbia River Treaty, the focus here in Boise is the Snake River as a major tributary of the Columbia, and in particular the Hells Canyon complex of dams. Those 3 dams from upstream to downstream are Brownlee, Oxbow, and Hells Canyon. Fish passage was originally planned but then abandoned during construction.
And of course, the Boise flows and is joined in the Snake by the Owyhee, the Payette, and the Malheur. And the Snake is joined by the Salmon and the Clearwater, then the Tucannon, and flows into the Chiwana at Lake Wallula. A recitation of names is almost a song itself, isn't it? So many tendrils coursing downhill in drips and drops and giant pools and cascades and waterfalls. This is the song of the great watershed of the Columbia River.
Tribes recognize that water is the essence of life. Everything on this earth needs water to survive, whether it be plant, animal, human. Everything needs water. And the tribes recognize that, and they've always lived in harmony with creation. We were always taught to take only what you can use and not more. Years ago, before these dams, there were Indian camps all along these rivers, clear on down to the mouth of the Columbia. Different tribes camped along the rivers to fish, to take care of whatever needs they had. And also, all the things that we needed were along these rivers. There were plants that were used for food, plants for medicine, plants for making shelters or tools or weapons, whatever. And also animals, game, they all have to come to water. And along the trails that led to the water is where you see a lot of hunting blinds and stuff, and they were able to harvest the game that they needed along the waterways. So water and the rivers meant life to the people. I remember one of our elders is deceased now. He pointed out one day that the river, meaning the Snake River, was once a free-flowing river. He said it is no longer a free-flowing river. He said it is one stagnant pool after the other.
I was fortunate to see the Payette, the Weezer, the Owyhee, the Malheur, the Sun, all these rivers, everything clear up into the upper drainage were all salmon-producing streams. the watersheds. Those were the original natal watersheds of the Columbia River system, the terminus of the fishery, 900 miles from the Pacific Ocean, the mother water. One of our past chairmen, he reminded us that there was a story once told in form of ceremony that one day there would be a great gray monster that would devour everything that the people, meaning all native peoples, that the people would survive upon. There would be nothing left for them to survive. That very thing that started that tamananwat, that wheel, would be devoured. Nothing would be left. As we come to find out, that great gray monster, that snake, as was described in the ceremonies, were the construction of the dams on the Columbia Snake Rivers.
The impact it's had, especially on the upper Snake River tribes, we lost a first food, a valued source of nutrition for our people.
This challenge we have is about our food sovereignty. This is about food security. This is about bringing salmon back, which is at the heart of our culture as Silks people, as Okanagan people. It was the source and the heart of our cultural and social well-being that shaped and formed how we related to the land, how we related to each other, how we related to settlers, how we related to all other tribes in the region. And so we had social gatherings, and it was it's really important to acknowledge and not forget that we were economically viable, sustainable peoples too. Our salmon we had a large trade economy amongst tribes. I want to quote our Grand Chief, our chairman, "The treaty has disrupted our way of life in ways that very few other things have."
I saw pictures out in semi-desert, drying racks of fall Chinook. All of that was taken. There's no compensation for it. Nothing was given. We've known that hatcheries, the way that they've been operated, and the aftermath of the dams being put together and all this beautiful spawning habitat taken away, they were put into concrete raceways, much like boarding schools, much like prisons, reform schools. That's how we've treated these animals, the things that provide us our way of life.
What could we change about the system that would make it better? Why are we having the problems we currently have? 15 tribes came together in 2010, developed a common views document that identified the problems and issues they had with the current treaty, and then outlined these objectives and goals going forward, that they wanted to be part of the treaty's negotiation team, part of the treaty's implementation team after 2024, that they wanted to see not just coordinated power generation and coordinated flood risk management, but coordinated ecosystem-based function added back in as an obligation of Canada and the United States under the treaty. As part of that, the tribes see restoring fish passage and reintroduction of the Canadian headwaters is an integral part of ecosystem-based function. With the Hells Canyon Basin, or the Hells Canyon Complex, and with Dorshak Dam, we wanted to make sure in the regional recommendation that came out of a process that anything that happened would not preclude fish restoration and reintroduction above the Hells Canyon Complex and Dorshak Dam.
I get criticized for being a researcher when I include my ideas about how I think about salmon or how I think about what we should be doing for them. It sounds like advocacy. It is advocacy because I care about the societal well-being of my community. How can I get away from that? That's what I was born into. That's my identity. And you're telling me to separate that from myself. I cannot, and I will not.
And we focus in an area that many people have forgotten about, which is upriver of Grand Coulee Dam, where there are no salmon. It's pretty easy to forget about a river when one of this unifying elements, one of these cultural ties to the water is taken away. So we ended up building about 5 dugout canoes in the upper Columbia River Basin above Grand Coulee where there are no salmon. So why 5 canoes? Well, there's 5 species of salmon and steelhead. So we were working with this with the kids, teaching and working with young people on the Columbia River who no longer have salmon on where they're from. So it's really starting from the basics and talking to kids, what do you want? They want to see the salmon come back. So what did we do? We decided to build canoes. And as we were building these canoes, you can see in the shape of this log here, one girl, a second grader, walked up to this log, and before it was a canoe, she walked up to it and she could see the shape of a salmon in there. And so we decided to carve these canoes into salmon, salmon returning home.
Contemplating the word stewardship, what it means. So let me take you back, about 2,500 years. And in the Talmud, a great, huge collection of Jewish wisdom, there's a famous debate recorded between 2 schools of thought, the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. One day they decided to have a debate, and the question was, would the world have been better if human beings had not been created? They argue and they argue, and this is the rare exception when, in a sense, Shammai wins. They take a vote and they decide, paradoxically, of course, really the world would have been better if we hadn't been here. But now that we're here, let us carefully examine our deeds. And I think it's an interesting way to think about stewardship. Whether the world would be better without us is a theoretical question. The reality is we're here, and we have certain powers to use, celebrate, abuse, exploit the rest of the creation. So the question is, what do we do with those powers? If we're not humble, if we lose our humility, well, it gives us dams that don't care about fish and policies that don't care about the rest of the creation, or even, or especially, many of our fellow human beings.
That's what we're dealing with here is restorative justice, aren't we, in a lot of ways. I mean, the history of the United States of America and its people vis-a-vis the native peoples is one horrible story. What would justice be like if we tried to make up? How could we sit at the table? And that's, again, a reason to talk. It's bigger than a river, but it's very much part of the river as well.
These conferences and those like this will continue to grow and expand. And that is why I am so grateful to be here and be a part of this movement. And I get quite emotional about that. Because part of that healing and reconciliation is the healing from the trauma that has been spoken about today. The trauma that I have to recover from as an Indigenous woman.
As Silas said, we're all in this together now. But on the other hand, we must not forget what's behind us. In order to know where we are going, we must know where we have been.
What we see when we look downstream of Hells Canyon Dam is a lot of success stories. And when you look upstream, you see what I would call an impediment to that success. We've demonstrated that we can pass fish, that we can engage in recovery-based programs, and that we can have harvest of anadromous fish. The only question is really, is your will?
The moment to encourage conversation is now, as the Columbia River Treaty is renegotiated between the United States and Canada. What was ignored in haste can now be acknowledged. The native peoples and their ancestral homes, the ecosystem itself as a unique treasure threatened by changing weather patterns, especially snowpack, and the great salmon runs that might be restored above human-made obstacles.
Whoa, 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 hey, yo. Hey, hey, yo. Whoa, 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 hey, yo. Hey, hey, yo. Limlimt. That song speaks to its time. It's time to go pick our huckleberries. It's time to go dig our camas. It's time to harvest. It's time to hunt. It's time to fish. Don't forget that. It's also time to pray.